For around 60 years, Pakistan seems to have been either under direct or covert military rule. Is democracy a viable option in a country marred with sectarian and religious violence? And what are the other options? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Imran Garda. Although all the military takeovers in Pakistan have been bloodless, their aftermaths have been stained with violence and bloodshed. It seems as though over a period the Pakistani army had acquired a constitutional prerogative to take over the government of the country. The country was thrust into further political turmoil when opposition leader and former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto was assassinated in late December. World leaders, including US President George Bush, emphasized Bhutto's killers were the enemies of democracy, a word also forcefully used by her 19-year-old son Bilawal in the aftermath of his mother's death.
Like all chairmen of the PPP, I will stand as the symbol of the Federation. The party's long and historic struggle for democracy will continue with renewed vigor, and I stand committed to the stability of the Federation. My mother always said, democracy is the best revenge.
A new democratic leadership for Bhutto's People's Party or an undemocratic dynastic inheritance? How have the shockwaves of events past and present moulded the Pakistan of today? And at what stage is the country on the road to democracy? Well, to answer all these questions and more, we're joined by our guests in Islamabad, Senator Anwar Beg, a member of the Pakistani Senate for the Pakistan People's Party. Also in Islamabad, Asha Amir Ali, a journalist and a member of the People's Rights Movement. And in London, Abdul Wahab Al-Afendi, Senior Research Fellow at the Centre for the Study of Democracy at the University of Westminster. Welcome, gentlemen and lady. Senator Beg, if I could start off with you before we broaden this out. A dynastic handover of power to a 19-year-old at the PPP. Surely this can't be too democratic, can it?
You see, upon the assassination of Ms. Bhutto on the 27th of December, she had probably written a will while she was living, because she was under constant life threat ever since she came to Pakistan on the 18th of October. As the world knows, that on the day when she arrived in Karachi on the 18th of October, there was a bomb blast in a procession in which over 170 people were killed. And again in Peshawar the other day, just before she was assassinated on the 27th of December, there were two bomb blasts before and after the rally up in Peshawar. So she was under constant death threat, and I think she has very wisely written a piece of will, a political will, in which she mentioned the name of her husband, Mr. Asif Zardari. When the will was read out at the Central Executive Committee in Larkana, I was attending that meeting. Mr. Zardari took the approval of the Central Executive Committee and then passed on the chairmanship to his young son, Bilawal, who is studying at Oxford these days. And he became the co-chairman. But Mr. Zardari also did mention in that meeting that Ms. Bhutto had specified a role for Mr. Zardari to play in the Pakistani politics. That is, that he would not contest the elections and he would play a role of an advisory to the Pakistan People's Party. And therefore, these elections which are being held now in Pakistan, Mr. Zardari is not running for any election, and he would be taking the back seat and advising the party politically and giving all the assistance and the backup to the Pakistan People's Party. So it's done absolutely on democratic lines. I mean, everything was approved by the Central Executive Committee of the Pakistan People's Party.
Abdul Wahab Al-Afendi, let's broaden this out now. The very definition of democracy, do you feel it's been hijacked by politicians and world leaders alike? Nobody says they're against democracy, do they? But we don't see too many democratic leaders around.
Well, let's put it this way. Democracy has become a shorthand for an ideological claim that a political system is one in which there are no losers. Everybody is a winner, everybody is accommodated, and there is a peaceful resolution of conflict. However, this concept needs to be deconstructed because there has been a lot of things put into it. And we have heard, for example, that the communists used to call their governments democratic because they say that they are truly democratic because they represent the proletariat who are the majority, while the liberal democracies represent the middle classes who are the minority. However, democracy itself is in crisis not only in Pakistan, but here in Britain we have problems of these scandals about, for example, party political funding and all sorts of other crises, which point to a conflict between the ideal and the practice of democracy. Ideally, democracy wants to be clean, to be inclusive, as we have said, and to be very, very strict about playing by the rules. However, not everybody plays by the rules, and I think the difference that, for example, in countries like Pakistan, is that there are principles which conflict with the rules. For example, the principles of dynastic loyalty, the principles of feudalism, the principle of ethnic loyalties, and I think we should not dismiss these principles out of hand. We should seek ways of, if these principles are a fact of life in a country, as we see in Kenya today, for example, ethnic divisions, at our peril, we ignore these differences. We should accommodate them somehow.
Asha Amir Ali, do you feel that President Musharraf defends democracy by suppressing democracy?
Well, I mean, I don't know if he's defending democracy. He has suppressed democracy. He says he's defending democracy. Yes, you're absolutely right. He says he's defending democracy, but he's actually suppressing democracy. We've seen the way that he has handled this crisis has been absolutely ridiculous. Any self-respecting ruler right now would have resigned. There's a turmoil on the streets of every major city in this country. Everyone is asking for his resignation. He got himself elected by a sham parliament. The military is, as you said, hijacked the political process over the last 60 years so many times. We don't even know what democracy looks like. We don't know what it sounds like. We don't know what it feels like. And that's because we haven't had a political process in this country for 60 years.
Abdul Wahab Al Effendi, February the 18th is a date set for elections in Pakistan. Musharraf has promised there'll be free, fair, transparent and safe. In your analysis, is that possible under the current circumstances?
Well, I think that's very difficult because there is the military rule is distorting a lot of rules of the game, and as I said, there are problems with the rules of the game as they are. In a game where everybody is cheating, something must be wrong, because democracy as it is put now, as it is, the elections as they are envisaged, are supposed to be, as in the West here, an individual decision of party members who then choose who they want to choose according to fully informed, according to a fully informed decision. Now, if the media is controlled, if the tribal and ethnic loyalties are being manipulated, if the individual is not an individual, is not free to vote or get the information, I think even if it was free and fair democracy, there would be problems. But they are now under military rule. They are certainly a big problem, and I think for any realistic outcome, there has to be a neutral kind of electoral commission, which I don't think pertains in Pakistan now, especially after the judiciary has been castrated.
And Vibeg, you get a sense that a Western-style parliamentary democracy is something that cannot be imposed on a country like Pakistan. What do you make of that?
You see, Pakistan has never cherished democracy. It has not matured as a democratic country because, as you know, in the last 60 years of our independence, more than half of the time we've been ruled by military dictators. And whenever democracy tries to flourish, tries to mature, in comes a military dictator and uproots democratic principles and roots from this country and puts in martial law or a military rule which is extended to over 10 years each. So I think in Pakistan, what we need is the international community has to help Pakistan to build up the democratic institutions in this country. Over the last so many years, we've been ruled by Mr. Musharraf in Pakistan since October 99. And ever since then, I mean, Mr. Musharraf has been is giving big statements of democracy and economically flourishing
sorry to
Pakistan.
interrupt you. Talking about his big statements, what he's saying is very similar to what you're saying. He's saying, give Pakistani democracy time to flourish, give us time, we're developing at our own rate. Surely you're talking about very similar things.
No, I'm sorry, I wouldn't agree with you. Mr. Musharraf he's a dictator by all standards. I mean, even if he's taken out his uniform, see what he's done to this country. I mean, he's issued a charge sheet against him yesterday by mentioning so many killings in the country. I mean, can you ever imagine that the Chief Justice of Pakistan is still under house arrest since November the 3? I just don't understand how the international community is supporting a military dictator in this country for what gains. I mean, the people of Pakistan are depressed. People of Pakistan do not even get flour to eat in the country today. The economy is bad. I mean, the rich are getting richer.
I want to bring in Asha Amir Ali because she wants to talk, and added to that, Asha Amir Ali, I want to ask you, is Pakistani democracy trapped between the army on the one hand and its alliance with the US on the other?
Absolutely. Imran, I'd like to come to this question of yours later. I think the question that you asked Senator Anwar Beg right now was very interesting. You know, is Pakistan ready for a Western-style democracy? And I think that we need to reassess the whole concept of, Western-style democracy in post-colonial states around the world. Anyway, until about 60 years ago, Pakistan was a colonial possession of the British Crown, and Pakistan and India both inherited the bureaucratic colonial state. Now, that state was essentially an extractive, oppressive mechanism. We inherited that. We also came into the world economy. We were integrated into the world economy at a level at which we simply could not compete with the Western nations. We inherited an agricultural base of 90% of Pakistan's population was living in rural areas at that time. Literacy levels were very low. The British had supported and in fact propped up landowning classes during their regime, and these landowning classes and some civil servants who were disgruntled with the fact that Congress would take over India, these are the people that inherited the Pakistani state.
So are you saying that feudalism is still huge in Pakistan and it's a major factor?
I'm saying, yes, I am saying that, but I'm also saying that it is important to historicize it and to not, I don't think it's possible to overemphasize the colonial legacy that we have had to deal with here. That's not to say that all our problems can be attributed to it, but I can think of 4 or 5 things right off the bat that when traced back, I mean, the nature of the independence movement too, I mean, it was essentially, I would argue that it was a movement of material interest by landlords and by an educated section of society that had had jobs in the States. They were essentially civil servants. It was not a popular movement, and I think the nature of the Pakistani state after it was formed reflects that. If it was a popular democratic movement in 1946 and 47, Pakistan would be in a very different position now. You can see that India and Pakistan have taken very different trajectories. So I think there's a lot of things involved here, and we shouldn't just expect, the principles of Western democracy to be universal in some ways, and then because a state doesn't conform to that, to declare it a failed state. I think that that's very Orientalist and very, almost Eurocentric.
Let's have a look at the big picture again. Locked in a battle with increasingly powerful Islamist militants, Pakistan is seen as a key front in the US war on terror. Washington has always expressed its support for democracy in Pakistan, but being a nuclear power, Pakistan holds more cards in the region and there's a lot more for the US to worry about. Historically, Washington has supported successive military rulers in the country. Critics argue that the danger of supporting Musharraf at this juncture is to potentially nurture a whole new generation of disenfranchised youth, ones who resent the West's support for someone they deem a dictator. Years ago, a similar scenario took place in Iran. The Islamic Revolution in 1979 was a reaction to US support for the undemocratic Shah. The difference this time is that Pakistan is a nuclear power. Though regretted by the US Secretary of State, it still seems that Washington prefers stability over democracy.
For 60 years, my country, the United States, pursued stability at the expense of democracy in this region, here in the Middle East. And we achieved neither. Now, we are taking a different course. We are supporting the democratic aspirations of all people. As President Bush said in his second inaugural address, America will not impose our style of government on the unwilling. Our goal instead is to help others find their own voice, to attain their own freedom.
Condoleezza Rice there. I want to bring in Abdul Wahab Al-Effendi in London. She does open herself up to attack when she speaks like that, because some would say, why do you then support Pervez Musharraf, but also support another country like Saudi Arabia as well, a very undemocratic country, whereas they're trying to push for democracy in other places. They called the war on Iraq one for democratic means. What do you make of that?
Well, I think the United States does not support democracy, and they have, although this tone, change of tone has been heard from President Bush before in 2003, the concept of democracy, which they seem to support, looks very much like what Musharraf is doing at the moment. For them, and even the support for Ms. Bhutto to come on was on the credential of her pro-Western credentials rather than on her democratic credentials, because Nawaz Sharif, who is an opponent because of his anti-American rhetoric, he was not supported. So I think the United States at the moment is involved, I think, in an interesting game, which also local players are playing. The issue here, there are things more important for the US than democracy. And also, I think, the whole issue of military intervention in Pakistan and elsewhere is this idea that there is something more valuable, more important than democracy. And I think this is a very counterproductive assessment and stance. And the military or any other group, for example, Islamic groups or any other groups which say that there are values which are more important than democracy, we end up with dictatorship like what we have in Pakistan. I think the alternative to Western-style democracy should not be, cannot be despotism. The responsibility here also of the politicians, we had a few years back hosted Ms. Bhutto at our center here and put to her difficult questions about the responsibility of the politicians themselves in undermining democracy. And at that time, I don't think she has done such a ridiculous thing as appointing a 19-year-old to lead a party. But I'm also willing to reiterate what I said earlier, that we should understand these things in concept. I don't think the senator who is with us here looks up to a 19-year-old who hasn't completed university to lead him. And I don't think that the People's Party doesn't have qualified people within it. But there is some calculations being made, and some I think people are playing games which are not what it seems to us.
Well, let me bring in the Senator Enver Beg there. Sorry to interrupt you. Senator Enver Beg, you want to respond?
You see, Pakistan People's Party, as we all know, is the most popular party in Pakistan. In the last elections, we had the highest number of votes polled was to the Pakistan People's Party. The problem in this country has been that democracy has not matured. I mean, the only one-time full term given to a political leader without any interference of the military was in the 70s when late Zulfikar Ali Bhutto ruled this country from 72 to 77. And ever since then, I mean, we've had military interventions, and this term of Mr. Musharraf from 99 up to 07, I mean, he has the elections in 07. It was all manufactured elections. It is a political party which is the last government which ruled, that is the Pakistan Muslim League Q, was brought in by Mr. Musharraf. He created this political party, and he's been supporting this political party quite openly in the last 5 years, and he has recently even made public statements that they should, the people of Pakistan should vote for these people who supported him. So the point what I'm trying to say is this, that democracy has not taken roots in Pakistan. We have to have a couple of elections, full-term elections, so that democracy takes root.
All right, interesting that you mentioned elections. Sorry to interrupt you there. I want to bring in Asha Amir Ali.
Over again and again.
Sorry to interrupt you. Asha Amir Ali, talking about elections, do you think that particularly from the West, there's a fixation with elections per se, not only in Pakistan, but Afghanistan, Iraq, etc., as the only example of democracy? What about human rights, press freedom, etc.?
I think you're absolutely right. I think there is an overemphasis on elections as being some kind of indicator of true democracy. And if Musharraf does hold these elections, and if they are deemed to be somewhat free and fair, perhaps the West will then back down and say, hey, well, look, you know, he allowed free and fair elections to take place. I mean, democracy is much deeper than just elections. It has to do with, you know, the rights that people are allowed to realize. It has to do with the extent to which people can determine the conditions of their existence. And here in Pakistan, it's unfortunate, but we haven't really seen any true democracy. I'm not a member of the People's Party, but I do believe that the only time that we came close to seeing you know, a true democratic spirit flourish in this country was during the early years of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's era. And in response to what you were asking Senator Anwar Beg earlier about whether it's a problem that, you know, a 19-year-old has been deemed to be the person to be taking orders from, I think that the People's Party right now, it is you know, principles in politics. Once you start doing politics you start playing in power politics and you start doing politics at a national level, principles remain important, but you have to compromise somewhere. And right now the situation in Pakistan is that the People's Party, its base in Sindh, they need a Bhutto right now. And so it was a logical choice. If the party was to stay together, if the party was to maintain its vote bank, it needed a Bhutto.
All right.
That's why they did it.
Sorry to interrupt you. I want to look at the global perspective once more with Abdul Wahab Al-Effendi. Looking at the particular word again, democracy, would you say that with hypocrisy in not respecting democracy in action from many of the global powers, the Western powers in particular, for example, when Hamas won the Palestinian election, do you think that because that's not been respected, this has made many people, particularly young people in the developing world, very angry and skeptical of any democratic initiatives that come after that?
Well, I think we have to look also at the perspective of the West. Yes, if I am a Western politician looking after the interests of my country, and I have options. If I have Abbas on one side and Hamas on one side, and they are fighting, and I have to back one of them, I will back the one who is closer to my interests. Similarly, the situation in Pakistan. If Musharraf is, if I see Musharraf with support, and I think the same people who supported the 19-year-old boy in the Sindh, there are people who are supporting Musharraf also for their gain, for their own interest and from their perspective, and they, like our speakers, they have justifications for this. If I am a Western politician, I would look, if I have no option, if I was given no option, if I see Pakistan united, if I see Palestine united behind the leader, then I have no option but to deal with that leader.
All right, Abdul Wahab Al-Effendi, I'm going to have to interrupt you. We have 15 seconds left on the program. It is a vast and fascinating topic. We can talk on this issue for hours. Thank you very much to our guests in Islamabad and in London. And thank you so much, the viewer, for joining us here on Inside Story. Bye-bye.